Sometimes the most devastating lies aren't the ones we're told once, but the ones we hear every single day until they become the foundation of who we think we are. My name is Sarah, and for 28 years, I lived inside a carefully constructed illusion that my parents built around me, brick by poisonous brick. It took becoming a mother myself to finally see the truth, and when I did, it shattered everything I thought I knew about family, love, and what it means to protect the people who matter most. Growing up in our pristine suburban home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, everything looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Richard and Patricia, were respected members of our community. Dad worked as a financial advisor downtown, always impeccably dressed in his pressed suits, while Mom volunteered at our church and hosted elaborate dinner parties that were the envy of our neighborhood. We had the manicured lawn, the two-car garage, the family portraits hanging in the hallway where everyone was smiling. But behind those smiles was a darkness that took me years to recognize, let alone escape from. I was 8 years old when my sister Emma was born. I remember the day Mom and Dad brought her home from the hospital, this tiny bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. I was so excited to be a big sister. I'd spent months preparing, practicing with my dolls, how I would hold her, feed her, sing to her. I had this little notebook where I'd written down all the things I wanted to teach her when she got older, like how to ride a bike, how to braid her hair, how to catch fireflies in the summer. That first night, I crept into her nursery just to watch her sleep, marveling at her tiny fingers and the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. But something shifted in our house when Emma arrived. At first, I thought it was just the normal adjustment that comes with a new baby. Emma cried a lot, more than I apparently had as a baby, according to my parents. They would exchange these looks across the dinner table when she wailed from her high chair. These silent communications that I didn't understand, but somehow made my stomach hurt. Mom would sigh heavily and say things like, "Some babies are just more difficult than others," while Dad would shake his head and mutter about bad temperaments being genetic. I tried so hard to help. When Emma was fussy, I would rush to her side, eager to comfort her. I'd learned that singing "You Are My Sunshine" usually calmed her down, and I took pride in being able to soothe her when no one else could. But instead of being pleased, my parents seemed annoyed by this. Mom would pull me away, saying I was spoiling her, and that she needed to learn to self-soothe. Dad would lecture me about how giving her too much attention would make her weak and dependent. The real change came when Emma turned 2. She was walking by then, this adorable toddler with blonde curls and the biggest blue eyes you'd ever seen. She followed me everywhere, calling me Sawa, because she couldn't quite pronounce Sarah yet. One afternoon, she was running through the living room, that clumsy toddler run where their excitement gets ahead of their coordination, and she tripped and hit her head on the corner of our heavy oak coffee table. The sound she made, that immediate wail of pain and fear, sent me flying across the room. I scooped her up in my arms, checking the small bump on her forehead, whispering soothing words as I rocked her. "It's okay, Emmy. You're okay. Sawa's got you," I murmured, using the special nickname only I called her. She buried her face in my shoulder, her little body shaking with sobs that were already starting to subside. That's when Mom appeared in the doorway. I expected her to rush over, concerned about Emma's injury, but instead, she stood there with this strange expression on her face, something between disappointment and calculation. "Put her down, Sarah," she said, her voice flat and cold. "She needs to learn that crying doesn't get her attention." I was confused. Emma was hurt. She was scared. She needed comfort. That's what you did when someone you loved was in pain. You helped them feel better. But Mom walked over and physically pulled Emma from my arms, setting her on the floor despite her renewed crying. "Go to your room and think about what happens when you run in the house," Mom said to Emma, who was only 2 and couldn't possibly understand what she'd done wrong. That night at dinner, my parents sat me down for what they called a serious talk. Dad led the conversation while Mom nodded along, occasionally adding her own points. They explained that they were using a special parenting technique with Emma, something they'd learned about that would make her strong and independent. They said that Emma was showing signs of being weak-willed, and attention-seeking, and if we weren't careful, she would grow up to be a burden on everyone around her. "You're such a good girl, Sarah," Dad said, reaching over to pat my hand. "You've always been so mature, so responsible. We never had these problems with you. But Emma, she's different. She needs a firmer hand, and we need you to help us with that." They explained that from now on, I wasn't to comfort Emma when she cried. I wasn't to praise her too much for her accomplishments. I was to point out her mistakes so she could learn from them. They made it sound logical, reasonable even. They used words like character building and tough love and preparing her for the real world. They said if I really loved my sister, I would help them make her strong. And because I was 10 years old and trusted my parents completely, I believed them. The next few years were a slow descent into something I can only call systematic emotional torture. My parents' treatment of Emma became increasingly cruel, though they always wrapped it in the language of concern and child development. When Emma drew pictures at school and brought them home proudly, Mom would barely glance at them before pointing out everything wrong with them. "The sun doesn't have a face, Emma. This is just scribbles. You need to try harder." When she learned to read earlier than most kids her age, Dad dismissed it. "Don't get a big head about it. Lots of kids can read. It doesn't make you special." When she made friends at school, my parents would find fault with every single one. Too loud, too quiet, too rich, too poor, bad influence, boring influence. Eventually, Emma stopped bringing friends home at all. And I participated. God help me. I participated in my baby sister's emotional destruction because I thought I was helping her. When she would run to me after Mom's harsh words, I would echo them. "Mom's right, Emmy. You need to do better." When she cried because Dad had mocked her attempts at gymnastics, calling her clumsy and uncoordinated, I would tell her to stop being so sensitive. Dad's just trying to help you improve. The worst part was the birthday situation. Emma's 8th birthday was the last one we celebrated. I remember it clearly because it was also the day I saw the light go out in her eyes for the first time. She'd been so excited all week, asking Mom what kind of cake they were making, wondering if any of her classmates would come to a party. But when the day arrived, there was no cake, no presents, no acknowledgement at all. Emma came downstairs that morning in her favorite dress, the purple one with little flowers on it, her face glowing with anticipation. She sat at the breakfast table, clearly waiting for someone to wish her happy birthday. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of Dad reading his newspaper and Mom buttering her toast. Finally, Emma's small voice piped up. "It's my birthday today." Dad lowered his newspaper and looked at her with this expression of mild disgust. "So," he said, "you want a medal for surviving another year? Birthdays are for people who've accomplished something worth celebrating." I watched Emma's face crumble, watched her shoulders slump as she pushed her untouched cereal around her bowl. Part of me wanted to secretly give her a hug, to whisper happy birthday in her ear, to sneak her a piece of candy or something, anything to mark the day. But I could feel my parents watching me, waiting to see if I would undermine their parenting. So I said nothing. I did nothing. And another piece of my sister's childhood died right there at our kitchen table. By the time Emma was 12 and I was 20, the dynamic in our house was fully established. Emma had learned to make herself as small and invisible as possible. She spent most of her time in her room, reading books or doing homework. She never asked for anything, never complained, never cried where anyone could see her. She'd learned that showing any emotion, any need, any vulnerability would only bring mockery and punishment. I, on the other hand, was the golden child. My parents lavished me with praise and opportunities. They paid for my college education at a prestigious private university. They threw me elaborate birthday parties and bought me a car for my graduation. They introduced me to all their friends as their successful daughter, conveniently never mentioning Emma at all. And I basked in it, telling myself I'd earned it by being strong, by not being weak like Emma. It makes me sick to think about now, how I internalized their poison so completely that I actually believed Emma deserved their treatment. I told myself she brought it on herself by being too sensitive, too needy, too everything my parents said she was. I'd learned to see her through their eyes, as a burden, a disappointment, a cautionary tale of what happened when you were weak. When I was 25, I met Marcus at a coffee shop near my office. He was funny and kind, with these warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He had this way of making everyone around him feel special and seen. We started dating, and within a year, we were living together. My parents approved of him, of course. He had a good job as a software engineer, came from a respectable family, and treated me like gold. When I got pregnant 2 years later, my parents were ecstatic. They immediately started making plans, talking about how they would help with the baby, how they would be the best grandparents. Mom started knitting blankets and buying designer baby clothes. Dad set up a college fund before we'd even picked a name. They transformed Emma's old room into a nursery, which struck me as ironic since they'd barely acknowledged Emma's existence when she actually lived there. The subject of Emma's room came up one evening when I was 8 months pregnant. Marcus and I were having dinner with my parents, discussing our plans for after the baby was born. We'd been living in a small one-bedroom apartment, and space was tight. That's when Mom made the suggestion that would change everything. "You know," she said, cutting into her salmon with precise movements, "Emma's room has been sitting empty for far too long. It would make a perfect nursery. Much better than trying to squeeze a baby into that tiny apartment of yours." I should have questioned why Emma's room was empty. She was only 16, still in high school. But I was so focused on my own situation, so deep in my parents' warped worldview, that I just nodded along. "That could work," I said, already imagining how we'd decorate it. "But what about Emma?" Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Your Aunt Linda has been saying she has too much space in her house since Uncle Robert passed. Emma could stay with her for a while. It would be good for her, get her out of her comfort zone, teach her some independence." And just like that, the plan was set. We'd move back in with my parents temporarily, use Emma's room for the baby, and Emma would go live with our aunt. It all sounded so reasonable, so practical. No one asked Emma what she thought. No one considered that we were literally displacing a 16-year-old girl from her home to make room for a baby. The day Emma moved out is burned into my memory with a clarity that still makes me nauseous. It was a rainy Saturday morning, the kind where the sky is so gray it seems to press down on everything. Emma was in her room, quietly packing her belongings into black garbage bags because my parents hadn't even bothered to get her proper boxes. I stood in her doorway, watching her fold her clothes with careful precision, placing each item gently into the bags as if they were made of tissue paper. Her school photos from previous years were stacked on her desk, the ones where her smile got progressively smaller each year, until by high school, she'd stopped smiling altogether. She picked them up, looked at them for a long moment, then left them on the desk. "You don't want those?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged without looking at me. "No point carrying around reminders of things you'd rather forget." The words hit me in a place I didn't want to examine. Some small part of me, buried under years of my parents' conditioning, recognized the profound sadness in that statement. But I pushed it down, telling myself she was being dramatic as usual. When she'd finished packing, the sum total of 16 years of life fitted into 4 garbage bags, she stood in the middle of the empty room. She looked so small, so young, so defeated. Her shoulders were hunched, and she kept her eyes fixed on the floor. For a moment, I saw her as she really was, not through the lens my parents had given me, but as a child who'd been systematically broken down until she believed she was worth less than garbage bags could hold. "Emma," I started, not even sure what I wanted to say. She looked up at me then, and the resignation in her eyes was like a physical blow. "It's okay, Sarah," she said quietly. "I know I'm in the way. I've always been in the way. At least at Aunt Linda's. I won't be anyone's burden." Mom appeared behind me then, clapping her hands together briskly. "Well, that's that then. Linda's waiting outside. Don't keep her waiting, Emma. You've inconvenienced enough people already." I watched from the window as Emma loaded her bags into Aunt Linda's car. The rain had picked up, and she was getting soaked, but she moved methodically, not hurrying. When she was done, she stood by the car for a moment, looking back at the house. I don't know what I expected, maybe for her to wave or show some emotion, but she just got in the car and left. She didn't look back again. That night, as Marcus and I settled into my parents' house and started arranging our things in what had been Emma's room, I felt something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. It was more like a hollowness, as if something essential had been carved out of me. I pushed it aside, focusing on the baby clothes Mom had laid out on the bed, the paint samples for the nursery walls, the future I was building on the bones of my sister's exile. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. My parents threw themselves into getting ready for their grandchild with an enthusiasm they'd never shown for their own children. Well, not for Emma anyway. Mom cooked elaborate, nutritious meals for me every day, making sure I had all the vitamins and minerals needed for a healthy pregnancy. Dad worked overtime to buy the best crib, the safest car seat, every baby gadget money could buy. Marcus painted the nursery a soft yellow, adding a border of dancing elephants that made me smile every time I saw it. We assembled the crib together, laughing when we realized we'd put one side on backward and had to start over. My baby shower was like something out of a magazine, with color-coordinated decorations and games, and a cake that was almost too beautiful to eat. Through all of it, no one mentioned Emma. It was as if she'd never existed, as if that room had always been waiting to be a nursery. The only reminder was a pencil mark on the doorframe where she'd measured her height over the years, stopping abruptly at age 12. Marcus asked about it once, and I told him we'd paint over it. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. When I went into labor 3 weeks later, it was textbook perfect. Marcus held my hand through the contractions, whispering encouragement and bad jokes to distract me from the pain. My parents waited in the hospital lobby, calling updates to family members and posting on social media about their soon-to-arrive grandchild. After 12 hours of labor, our daughter was born. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect, with a full head of dark hair and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. We named her Lily, after Marcus's grandmother. The moment the nurse placed her in my arms, something fundamental shifted inside me. I looked down at this tiny, vulnerable being who depended on me for everything, and I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. But with that love came something else, a creeping awareness that started as a whisper and would soon become a roar. The first few weeks at home were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and trying to figure out how to function on 2 hours of sleep. My parents were incredibly helpful, almost too helpful. Mom practically moved into our room, hovering over every feeding, every bath, every moment of Lily's day. Dad baby-proofed the entire house twice and installed a state-of-the-art baby monitor system that probably could have tracked a spacecraft. Marcus went back to work after 2 weeks, and I settled into a routine with Lily. She was an easy baby for the most part, content to nurse and sleep and stare at the world with those dark, curious eyes. But like all babies, she had her moments. She'd cry when she was hungry or tired, or just needed to be held. Normal baby things. What wasn't normal was my parents' reaction to her crying. The first time it happened, Lily was about a month old. She'd woken up from her nap crying, that urgent, hungry cry that newborns do. I was in the middle of heating up some soup for lunch, so I called out that I'd be right there. But before I could put down the pot, I heard Mom's voice from the nursery. "Stop that noise right now," she was saying in the same cold tone she'd used with Emma. Good babies don't cry for no reason. I practically flew up the stairs, my heart pounding. I found Mom standing over Lily's crib, not touching her, just staring down at my crying daughter with disapproval. "Mom, what are you doing? She's hungry. She's supposed to cry when she's hungry." Mom turned to me with that look I knew so well, the one that said I was being too soft, too indulgent. If you run to her every time she makes a sound, she'll never learn to be independent. You don't want her to end up like Emma, do you? Like Emma. The words hit me like ice water. Emma, who at 16 had packed her entire life into garbage bags without complaint. Emma, who had learned to be so independent that she'd erased herself entirely. I picked up Lily, feeling her little body relax against mine as I offered her the bottle. "She's a baby, Mom. She's supposed to need me." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Mom had said. I lay in bed next to Marcus, listening to Lily's soft breathing through the monitor, and for the first time in years, I let myself really think about Emma. Not the Emma my parents had taught me to see, but the real Emma, the toddler who'd called me Siwa and followed me everywhere. The little girl who'd drawn pictures of our family with herself smaller than everyone else. The teenager who'd left without looking back because she'd learned that looking back only brought pain. Over the next few weeks, I found myself hyper-aware of every interaction between my parents and Lily. The little comments that seemed harmless on the surface but carried poison underneath. The way they'd frown when she cried, even normal baby cries. The way they compared her constantly to how I'd been as a baby, setting up a dynamic that was heartbreakingly familiar. But it wasn't until Lily was 3 years old that everything finally came to a head. We'd moved out of my parents' house by then, into a small rental across town. But my parents were still heavily involved in our lives, babysitting while I worked part-time, coming over for dinner several times a week. I told myself it was good for Lily to have grandparents who loved her so much, ignoring the growing unease I felt every time I left her alone with them. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we were all in the living room. Lily was playing with her blocks, that focused concentration that toddlers have when they're figuring something out. She was trying to balance one block on top of another, her little tongue poking out slightly with effort. When she finally got it to stay, she looked up at me with such pride, such pure joy. "Mama, look, I did it!" I started to respond, to tell her how clever she was, when the tower toppled. The blocks clattered to the floor, and Lily's face scrunched up in frustration. She reached for the fallen blocks, moving too quickly in her eagerness to try again, and bumped her head on the corner of the coffee table. The same coffee table Emma had hit all those years ago. The parallel was so exact it felt like time folding in on itself. Lily's cry, that shocked wail of pain and surprise. The way she reached for me, her arms outstretched, tears already starting to roll down her chubby cheeks. And me, frozen for a moment by the most intense déjà vu I'd ever experienced. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I scooped her up, pulling her close, checking the small red mark on her forehead. "Oh, baby, you're okay. Mama's got you. That silly table jumped right out and bumped you, didn't it?" That's when Mom lunged forward. Actually lunged, like she was trying to intercept a football pass. She grabbed at Lily, trying to pull her from my arms. "Let her cry by herself," she commanded. "We have to toughen her up. She needs to learn." Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed doubts, of buried guilt, of ignored instincts came roaring to the surface. I pulled Lily tighter against me and shoved my mother away with my free hand. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice low and dangerous in a way I'd never heard it before. "Don't you dare touch my daughter." Mom stumbled back, her face a mask of shock. Dad stood up from his chair, his expression darkening. "Sarah, you will not speak to your mother that way. She's only trying to help." "Help?" I laughed, but it was a broken sound. "Like you helped Emma?" The room went silent, except for Lily's sniffles against my shoulder. I carried her to our bedroom, locking the door behind us. I sat on the bed, rocking her gently, whispering soothing nonsense words until she calmed down. As I held her, feeling her little body relax trustingly against mine, I finally let myself see the truth I'd been running from for years. My parents were abusers, not the kind that left bruises you could photograph, but the kind that broke spirits so thoroughly their victims learned to break themselves. They'd done it to Emma, and they'd tried to make me their accomplice. Worse, they'd succeeded. I'd been their willing weapon in my sister's destruction. I sat in that room for an hour, holding my daughter and falling apart. I cried for Emma, for the childhood she'd never had, for the love she'd never felt. I cried for myself, for the sister I'd failed to be, for the person my parents had twisted me into. But mostly, I cried from relief, because I'd caught myself in time. I'd seen the cycle trying to repeat itself, and I'd broken it. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, my parents were gone. Marcus was in the kitchen, cleaning up the lunch dishes with movements that were a little too careful, a little too precise. He looked up when I entered, and I could see the questions in his eyes. "They left," he said unnecessarily. "Your mom said to call when you've come to your senses." I laughed again, and this time it sounded more real. I think I just did. I told him everything that night, not the sanitized version I'd been telling myself for years, but the truth. How we'd isolated Emma, mocked her, denied her love and affection and basic human kindness. How we'd made her believe she was worthless, unwanted, a burden to be endured rather than a child to be cherished. How I'd stood by and watched it happen, participated in it, justified it. Marcus listened without interrupting, though I could see the horror growing in his eyes. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Where is Emma now? The truth was, I didn't know. After she'd moved in with Aunt Linda, I'd made no effort to stay in touch. My parents had discouraged it, of course, saying she needed to learn to stand on her own feet without running back to family every time things got hard. But I hadn't needed much discouragement. I'd been relieved not to have to see her, not to have to face the living reminder of what we'd done. I need to find her, I said, the words coming out in a rush. I need to apologize. I need to try to fix this, if it's even fixable. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to call Aunt Linda. My hands shook as I dialed the number, and I almost hung up twice before she answered. When I asked about Emma, there was a long pause. She's doing well, Linda said carefully. She's 20 now in college. Studying to be a therapist, actually. She wants to help kids who've been through trauma. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. Emma, who'd been traumatized by her own family, wanting to help other traumatized children. I asked if Linda could give me Emma's number, if she thought Emma would be willing to talk to me. I'll ask her, Linda said. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. That girl came to me, broken in ways that made me want to drive back to your parents' house and give them a piece of my mind. She didn't think she deserved food unless she'd earned it. She apologized constantly for existing. She had panic attacks at the thought of inconveniencing anyone. It's taken years of therapy and love and patience to help her understand that she has value. So if you're going to contact her, you'd better be damn sure you're doing it for her sake, not to make yourself feel better. I deserved that. I deserved worse. But I promised Linda that I understood, that I wouldn't contact Emma unless she wanted me to. Then I hung up and waited. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I knew before I answered who it would be. Sarah? The voice was older, more confident than I remembered, but still unmistakably Emma. Emma. I had to stop and clear my throat. Thank you for calling. I didn't know if you would. Anna, I almost didn't, she admitted. But my therapist thinks it might be good for me to hear what you have to say. So what do you have to say? Where did I even begin? How did I apologize for a lifetime of cruelty? How did I explain that I'd been brainwashed without making it sound like I was avoiding responsibility? In the end, I just started talking. I told her about Lily, about the moment in the living room that had shattered my delusions. I told her about finally seeing our parents for what they were. And then I told her the hardest truth of all. I was a terrible sister, I said, my voice thick with tears. I failed you in every possible way. I chose them over you, their approval over your well-being. I participated in hurting you, and I convinced myself it was for your own good. There's no excuse for that. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, and I'm so, so sorry. Emma was quiet for so long, I thought she might have hung up. Then she spoke, and her words broke my heart all over again. I used to dream that you'd protect me, she said softly. When I was little, before I understood that you were on their side, I used to imagine that one day you'd stand up to them, that you'd take my hand and we'd run away together, somewhere they couldn't hurt me anymore. It took me a long time to stop waiting for you to save me. I'm sorry, I whispered, because what else could I say? I know, she said, and I appreciate you calling, I really do. But I need you to understand that I've built a life without any of you in it. I have friends who love me, a chosen family who sees my worth. I'm not that scared little girl anymore. I'm glad, I said, and I meant it. You deserved so much better than what we gave you. There was another pause, and then Emma said something that surprised me. Tell me about your daughter. Lily, you said her name was? So I did. I told her about Lily's dark hair and infectious laugh, about how she loved butterflies and hated peas, and insisted on wearing her princess dress to the grocery store, about how fierce and fearless she was, how she approached the world with arms wide open. As I talked, I could hear Emma listening, making little sounds of interest. "She sounds wonderful," Emma said when I finished. "You're going to be a better mother to her than they were to us." "I'm trying," I said. "I'm really trying. I've cut them off, Emma, my parents. After what happened the other day, I can't let them near Lily. I won't let them do to her what they did to you." "Good," Emma said firmly. That's really good, Sarah. Don't let them convince you otherwise. They're very good at making wrong seem right." We talked for a few more minutes, carefully, like we were both walking on ice that might crack at any moment. When we hung up, Emma promised to think about maybe meeting Lily someday when she was ready. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The confrontation with my parents came the next day. They showed up at our house unannounced, letting themselves in with the spare key I'd forgotten they had. Marcus was at work, and I was giving Lily lunch when they walked into the kitchen like they owned the place. "We need to talk about your behavior yesterday," Dad announced, pulling out a chair and sitting down without invitation. Mom stood behind him, her arms crossed, radiating disapproval. "You're right," I said, surprising them. "We do need to talk. But first, give me your key. You're not welcome to come and go as you please anymore." Dad's face darkened. "Excuse me?" "The key," I repeated, holding out my hand. "Give it to me, or I'll change the locks today." They exchanged one of their looks, those silent communications I'd grown up watching. Finally, Dad reached into his pocket and slammed the key on the table. "This is ridiculous, Sarah. We're your parents. We're Lily's grandparents." "Yes," I agreed. "And you're also the people who emotionally abused Emma for 16 years, who kicked her out of her home to make room for my baby, who tried to start the same cycle of abuse with Lily yesterday." "Abuse?" Mom's voice was sharp with indignation. "We never laid a hand on that girl. We gave her food, shelter, clothing. We did our duty. You destroyed her," I said flatly. "You made her believe she was worthless. You denied her love, affection, basic human kindness. You turned her own sister against her. That's abuse, whether you want to admit it or not." Dad stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped against the floor. Lily startled in her high chair, looking between us with wide eyes. "That girl was weak," he said, soft. "Everything we did was to make her stronger, to prepare her for the real world. If you can't see that, then you're as weak as she was." "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my house and don't come back," Mom gasped. "You can't be serious. After everything we've done for you, we made you who you are." "Yes," I agreed. "You made me into someone who would hurt my own sister to win your approval, someone who would choose cruelty over compassion. But I'm not that person anymore. I won't let you make Lily into that person." What followed was ugly. They tried everything: guilt, manipulation, threats. They reminded me of all they'd done for me, all the advantages they'd given me. They said I was being ungrateful, hysterical, that I'd regret this when I calmed down. When that didn't work, they switched tactics. "You need us," Mom said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. "Who's going to help with Lily? Who's going to babysit when you need to work? You can't do this alone, Sarah." "I'm not alone," I said. "I have Marcus, and I'd rather figure it out myself than expose Lily to your poison." That's when Dad played what he clearly thought was his trump card. "Fine," he said, "but don't come crying to us when you need money. That college fund we started for Lily? Consider it closed. You're on your own." I looked at him, this man I'd spent my whole life trying to please, and felt nothing. No panic, no regret, just a sort of empty relief. "Okay," I said simply. They left after that, Mom in tears, Dad in a cold fury. I deadbolted the door behind them, then sank to the floor, suddenly exhausted. Lily was banging her spoon on her tray, babbling happily, blissfully unaware of what had just happened. I pulled myself together, finished feeding her lunch, and then called Marcus to tell him about the confrontation. That evening, As we discussed the practical implications of cutting off my parents, from childcare arrangements to finances, Marcus asked me something that had clearly been bothering him. "Do you think they'll just accept this? Your parents don't seem like the type to give up easily." He was right. 2 weeks later, the harassment started. Phone calls at all hours, from their numbers and unknown ones. Messages that alternated between pleading and threatening. They showed up at my work, making a scene until security escorted them out. They called Marcus's parents, spinning some story about how I was having a mental breakdown and keeping their granddaughter from them. But the worst came a month after I'd cut them off. I was at the park with Lily, pushing her on the swings, when I noticed a woman watching us. She had a clipboard and a concerned expression, and my stomach dropped before she even approached. "Sarah Collins?" she asked, though she clearly already knew who I was. "Yes?" "I'm Janet Walker from Child Protective Services. We've received a concerning report about the welfare of your daughter. I'm here to do a welfare check." My legs nearly gave out. They'd called CPS. My own parents had called CPS on me. I managed to keep my voice steady as I explained that Lily was fine, that this was a malicious report from estranged family members. Janet was professional, but thorough. She asked to see our home, to speak with Lily, to review her medical records. The next few hours were a nightmare. Having a stranger walk through my home, evaluating my parenting, checking Lily for signs of abuse or neglect. Lily, thankfully, was her usual cheerful self, chattering away to Janet about her toys and her favorite foods. When Janet finally left, saying she found no evidence of neglect or abuse, but that the case would remain open pending further investigation, I broke down completely. Marcus found me sobbing in Lily's room an hour later. I told him about the CPS visit, and his face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. "They're trying to take her away," he said. "They're actually trying to take our daughter away because you won't let them abuse her." That night, we made 2 decisions. First, we would hire a lawyer, and second, we would reach out to anyone else who might have witnessed my parents' behavior over the years. If they wanted a fight, we'd give them one. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in family law, was appalled when we told her the whole story. She immediately started documenting everything, from the harassment to the false CPS report. She also suggested we reach out to Emma to see if she'd be willing to provide a statement about her own experiences. I hesitated. Emma had been clear that she'd built a life away from all this drama. The last thing I wanted was to drag her back into it. But when I called and explained the situation, her response was immediate. "They did what?" Her voice was sharp with anger. "They called CPS on you? For protecting Lily from them?" "I'm sorry," I said. "I shouldn't have called. I don't want to involve you in this." "Are you kidding? Sarah, they're trying to do to Lily what they did to me. Of course I'll help. What do you need?" What followed was the strange experience of reconnecting with my sister through shared legal strategy. Emma wrote a detailed statement about her childhood, the emotional abuse, the gaslighting, the ultimate rejection. Reading it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Seeing our childhood laid out in black and white, from her perspective, was devastating. But Emma wasn't the only one who came forward. Aunt Linda provided her own statement about the condition Emma had been in when she'd taken her in. Several cousins shared memories of family gatherings where my parents' treatment of Emma had made them uncomfortable. Even our old neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, wrote about the times she'd seen Emma crying in the backyard while the rest of the family was inside laughing. The CPS investigation was closed after 2 weeks, with a finding that the report had been unsubstantiated and appeared to be retaliatory in nature. Patricia then helped us file for a restraining order against my parents, using their harassment and the false CPS report as evidence. The hearing for the restraining order was surreal. Seeing my parents in court, watching them try to paint themselves as loving grandparents being kept from their granddaughter by an unstable daughter was like watching strangers. Their lawyer argued that they had a right to a relationship with Lily, that I was being vindictive and irrational. But Patricia was prepared. She presented evidence of the harassment, the false CPS report, threatening voicemails they'd left. She read excerpts from Emma's statement, though Emma herself chose not to attend. She painted a picture of a pattern of abuse spanning decades. When the judge granted the temporary restraining order and scheduled a full hearing for a permanent one, my parents looked stunned. I don't think they'd ever imagined consequences for their actions. They'd always been able to control the narrative, to make their version of reality the only one that mattered. As we left the courthouse, Mom tried to approach me, despite the order that had just been issued. "Sarah, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "How can you do this to us? We're your parents. We love you." "No," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos of emotions inside me. "You don't love me. You love the version of me that does what you want, thinks what you tell me to think, hurts who you want me to hurt. But that's not love. That's control. And I'm done being controlled." The permanent restraining order was granted a month later. My parents were prohibited from contacting me, Marcus, or Lily in any way. They were required to stay at least 500 feet away from our home, Lily's daycare, and my workplace. The judge also recommended they seek therapy if they ever hoped to have a relationship with their granddaughter in the future. They didn't take it well. According to family members who still had contact with them, they spent months telling anyone who would listen about how they'd been wronged, how I'd been brainwashed, how Emma had poisoned me against them. But eventually, even their flying monkeys got tired of the drama. One by one, family members started reaching out to me, saying they'd never felt comfortable with how my parents treated Emma, that they were proud of me for protecting Lily. The most surprising call came from my dad's brother, Uncle James, whom I'd barely seen growing up. "Your father was always like this," he told me. "Even as kids, he had to be in control, had to be right. I watched him do it to your mother when they first got married, wore her down until she became just like him. I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry." As the months passed, life settled into a new normal. It was harder in some ways, without the financial support and free babysitting my parents had provided. But it was also lighter. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd spent managing their emotions, anticipating their reactions, trying to stay in their good graces. Without that constant performance, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. Emma and I began to slowly rebuild our relationship. It started with phone calls every few weeks, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared past. Then occasional coffee meetings when she was in town for school breaks. The first time she met Lily, I was a nervous wreck. But Lily, with the instinctive wisdom of children, took one look at Emma and declared, "You're sad. Do you want a hug?" Emma burst into tears and accepted the hug from my 3-year-old, and I knew we were going to be okay. Not fixed, not magically healed, but okay. We were both committed to doing the work, to being the sisters we should have been all along. The real test came when Lily turned 4. As her birthday approached, I found myself struggling with memories of Emma's birthdays, of all the celebrations denied, all the joy withheld. I called Emma the night before, needing to process the guilt that still sometimes overwhelmed me. "I keep thinking about your 8th birthday," I told her. "How you came downstairs in that purple dress, so excited, and they just crushed you. And I let them. I sat there and let them." Emma was quiet for a moment. "You were 12, she finally said. "You were a child too, Sarah. A child who'd been taught that love was conditional, that approval had to be earned. Yes, you made choices that hurt me, but you were also a victim of their manipulation. That doesn't make it okay," I said. No, she agreed. "It doesn't. But it makes it understandable. And more importantly, you're not that person anymore. You're breaking the cycle. You're giving Lily what we never had. That matters." Lily's 4th birthday party was everything a birthday should be. Balloons and cake, and more presents than any child needed. But the best moment was when Emma arrived with a gift she'd made herself, a photo album filled with pictures of the two of them together over the past year. Lily squealed with delight, immediately demanding that Aunt Emmy read through the whole thing with her. Watching them together, seeing the pure love in Emma's eyes as she listened to Lily's excited chatter, I felt a peace I'd never expected to find. We couldn't undo the past. I couldn't give Emma back her childhood or erase the scars our parents had left. But we could do this. We could choose love over control, connection over isolation, healing over perpetual wound. As I write this, Lily is now 6 years old, a confident, happy child who has no idea that love can be withheld as punishment or that family can be a source of fear. She knows that when she falls, someone will pick her up. When she succeeds, someone will celebrate with her. When she fails, someone will help her try again. She knows that she is loved not for what she does, but for who she is. Emma graduated with her degree in psychology and is working with at-risk youth. She says her experiences, as painful as they were, help her recognize the signs of emotional abuse that others might miss. She's saving kids the way no one saved her. We see each other regularly now, and while there are still moments of awkwardness, of old hurts surfacing, we're committed to working through them. Marcus and I had another daughter 2 years ago. We named her Hope, which felt appropriate given everything we'd been through to get to a place where we could welcome another child without fear. Emma was in the delivery room, holding my hand, telling me I was doing great. When Hope was born, Emma was the second person to hold her, after me. The look on her face as she cradled her niece, this mix of joy and healing and promise, was worth every hard conversation, every moment of painful growth. My parents are still out there somewhere. I hear updates occasionally through the family grapevine. They moved to Florida, telling everyone they needed to get away from the negativity. They've never attempted to contact us again, whether due to the restraining order or their own choice. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if they ever have moments of clarity, if they ever see what they lost. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. The lie my family taught me, that love had to be earned through perfection and compliance, that some children were worth more than others, that cruelty could be kindness if you just framed it right, took me 28 years to unlearn. But unlearn it I did. In its place, I've learned new truths. That love is not a reward for good behavior, but a birthright. That children need acceptance more than criticism. That the cycles we inherit don't have to be the ones we pass on. Sometimes late at night, I think about that little girl in the purple dress, waiting for someone to wish her happy birthday. I can't go back and be the sister she needed then, but I can be the sister she deserves now, and I can make sure that my daughters never have to wonder if they're worthy of love. They'll know with every fiber of their being that they are. That's the truth I'm teaching them. That's the legacy I'm choosing to pass on. The other day, Lily asked me why she doesn't have grandparents like some of her friends. It was a question I'd been dreading, but I tried to answer honestly in an age-appropriate way. I told her that sometimes adults make choices that hurt people, and when that happens, we have to protect ourselves and the people we love. She thought about it for a moment, then asked if that was why Aunt Emma used to be sad. Yes, I said simply. But she's not sad anymore, is she? Lily shook her head emphatically. No! Aunt Emmy smiles all the time now, and she gives the best hugs, and she's teaching me to paint. That's right, I said, pulling her close. Sometimes people who start out sad end up the happiest because they learn how strong they are. Like in my butterfly book, Lily exclaimed, making one of those connections that kids are so good at. The caterpillar has to go in the dark cocoon, but then it comes out beautiful. I kissed the top of her head, marveling at her innocent wisdom. Exactly like that, baby. Exactly like that. As I tucked her in that night, she asked one more question. Mommy, will you always love me, even if I'm not perfect? Oh, sweetheart, I said, smoothing her hair back from her face. I will love you forever and always, no matter what. When you're happy, when you're sad, when you're angry, when you make mistakes, when you succeed, when you fail. There is nothing you could ever do that would make me stop loving you. That's what real love is. She smiled sleepily, satisfied with that answer, and drifted off to sleep. I sat there for a while, watching her breathe, thinking about all the nights Emma must have gone to sleep, wondering why she wasn't good enough, why she couldn't earn what I was given so freely. I couldn't change that, but I could make sure it never happened again. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Coffee tomorrow? I have news, with a series of happy emojis. I smiled, texting back my confirmation. We had plans to take the girls to the zoo this weekend, And I needed to remember to pack extra snacks because Hope was going through a growth spurt and eating everything in sight. These were the moments that mattered now. Not the grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but the quiet accumulation of normal, healthy family life. Coffee with my sister, trips to the zoo, bedtime questions about love, birthday parties where everyone was celebrated. The simple, radical act of showing up for each other, consistently and without conditions. The lie my family taught me nearly destroyed us. But the truth we're living now, messy and imperfect and real, is slowly healing us. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.